Okay, imagine for a second that your very life is on the line. You're completely cornered, you're desperate, and the threats against you, they aren't just abstract legal troubles. They are deeply physical, visceral, and immediate. You cry out, terrified that your enemies will, quote, lest like a lion they tear my soul apart, rending it in pieces. Now, that is a shockingly violent, desperate opening image, right? It instantly sets these unbelievably high emotional stakes for what we're about to read. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey deep into antiquity. We're going to examine the poetic text of Psalm 7, but we're going to look at it through a very specific, totally gripping lens. We're going to read it as a step-by-step ancient legal drama. It's basically a courtroom thriller from thousands of years ago, complete with an accused defendant, a terrifying prosecution, and an ultimate supreme judge. Let's dive in. All right, let's look straight at the source text. Notice the header right at the very top of the English Standard Version of Psalm 7. It says this is of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjaminite. Now, historians still debate exactly who Cush was, but this header perfectly establishes our historical context. This isn't just some generic poem we're looking at, it's a direct response to a specific accusation. Someone named Cush has said something incredibly damaging, something life-threatening, and the speaker is formally filing his defense. Now, look closely at that very first word, shiggaion. If we check footnote A from the source material, it defines shiggaion as probably a musical or liturgical term. Just think about what that actually implies for a second. This intense legal defense, this desperate plea for his life, was designed to be performed. It was sung. It's a really powerful reminder that in ancient cultures, the lines between law, worship, and musical expression were just completely intertwined. To navigate our way through this ancient courtroom, we're going to follow 5 clear phases. First, the plea for refuge. Second, an oath of innocence. Third, the righteous judge. Fourth, the boomerang effect. And finally, praise for the outcome. So let's start with phase 1, the plea for refuge. You know, in any legal proceeding, the very first thing that happens is establishing standing, right? Who is speaking and what is their current condition? Well, in the very first verse, the speaker urgently cries out, "Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me." Instantly, the speaker establishes themselves as a victim. They are not the aggressor here. They are actively on the run. They urgently require a safe haven, a refuge from an imminent pursuing threat before they are literally torn apart. Which brings us to phase 2, an oath of innocence. This absolutely brilliantly illustrates the defense phase. Verses 3 through 5 operate as this dramatic, conditional self-curse. On the if side, the speaker lists out the specific charges. If I've done wrong, if I've repaid a friend with evil, if I've plundered without cause. And then we get the let side, the consequence. If those things are true, let the enemy trample my life into the ground and lay my glory in the dust. I mean, this is the ultimate testimony under oath. The speaker is definitively proving their innocence by staking their very life, their reputation, and their bodily survival on the absolute truth of their testimony. Let's look just a little closer at those specific charges. The English text says, "repaid my friend with evil." But if we check footnote B from the source, we uncover this fascinating linguistic nuance. The original Hebrew translates more literally to "the one at peace with me." Now, we've all felt the sting of a broken promise or a fractured friendship, right? But betraying someone who is actively at peace with you? That was a severe moral crime in the ancient world. It massively heightens the emotional and legal stakes of the accusation against our speaker. Moving right along to phase 3, the righteous judge. Having solemnly sworn his innocence, the speaker now shifts the focus entirely away from his earthly accusers. Look at the explicit legal language used here in verses 6 and 7. Arise, you have appointed a judgment. The text portrays God not just as some distant creator, but as an active, presiding judge who is convening an assembly of the peoples. The speaker is essentially saying, look, I cannot get justice in this earthly court against Cush, so I am appealing my case directly to the Supreme Court of the universe. But how exactly does this supreme judge make a ruling? Verse 9 says, God tests the minds and hearts. But, and this is wild, if you look at footnote C, the literal Hebrew actually says the hearts and kidneys. Kidneys? Why kidneys? Well, in ancient Hebrew anatomy and poetry, the kidneys were considered the absolute innermost, most hidden center of human emotion and conscience. So the speaker is asserting that this judge doesn't just look at the external evidence presented. This judge literally x-rays the deepest, most hidden motives of the accused. You simply cannot lie in this courtroom.
Next up is Phase 4, the boomerang effect. First, we see the judge prepare for a guilty verdict. Look at this list of divine weaponry from verses 12 and 13. If a man doesn't repent, the text says the judge whets or sharpens his sword. He bends and readies his bow. He prepares deadly weapons and fiery arrows. It's this terrifying, escalating imagery of martial preparation. The judge is entirely ready to execute justice, for sure, with absolute precision and force.
But then, verses 14 and 15 reveal this incredible insight into the inherent self-destructive nature of evil. Notice the 4 steps mapping out this startling metaphor. Step 1, the wicked man conceives evil. Step 2, he becomes pregnant with mischief. Step 3, he gives birth to lies. It is literally a full gestation cycle of wrongdoing, and what's the ultimate result of giving birth to this evil? Step 4, he digs a pit and he falls right into the very hole he made. This brilliantly illustrates that often divine justice isn't a lightning bolt from the sky, it's simply allowing the wicked's own mischief to run its natural course and become its own downfall. And finally, we land at Phase 5, praise for the outcome. The text wraps up in verse 17 with a really powerful emotional resolution. The speaker vows, "I will give to the Lord the thanks due to his righteousness." Notice exactly what is being praised here. The speaker isn't just saying, "Hey, thanks for saving my skin." The thanks is specifically due to the judge's righteousness. It's a celebration that the foundational moral order of the universe actually holds firm. When the innocent are protected and the wicked fall into their own traps, it proves that the courtroom of reality is ultimately just. Which brings us to the final thought of our explainer. Verse 16 states plainly that the wicked man's mischief returns upon his own head, and on his own skull his violence descends. It's a perfect encapsulation of the boomerang mechanics of ancient justice we've explored today. But as we close the book on this ancient courtroom drama, it leaves us with a really provocative question to consider in our modern world. Looking at the reality around us today, does the violence of the wicked always descend on their own skull? I'll leave you to reflect deeply on that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.